Dr. John, introduce us to your family.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, I don't know that that's a wedding portrait. I think they were older than that, because I think it's the same time period as when all the kids were born. Because that's all the kids. It's Vera and Preston Tucker, and then it is Noble Tucker in the back, Shirley Tucker, Preston Tucker Jr., Mary Lee Tucker, and then John Tucker on the right is our father, and then his parents in front of him there. It's a beautiful portrait.
Beautiful portrait.
It's probably taken the same day because she's got the same dress on.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Keen observation by John Tucker Jr. All right, go to the next slide.
Here we go.
Okay. Now, what we have here is the actual debut of the Tucker back on June 19th of 1947. Introduce your father to us.
Okay, well, I'll go from left to right. That's Preston Jr., Noble, my dad, or Preston, Vera, Mary Lee, and my dad, John Tucker, on the far right.
And
the Tin Goose.
Right there.
You can see the champagne bottle that she just broke on the front of the car on the floor.
Yes. I'll go to the next slide, please, Rob. Okay, now here's what you see in the Tucker movie. Go across, introduce again, John.
Okay, so Christian Slater is playing Preston Jr. Of course, Jeff Bridges is playing Preston. Joan Allen is playing Vera. It's Christy Shimeko, I think is her name.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The Noble, that's Noble. And then Johnny is the little 5-year-old kid way down there in the corner.
Actually, that's his stand-in double.
Oh, okay. Because my, I'll just add this little anecdote that my dad used that very well. The fact that he was not 17, he was 5.
Okay.
All his life.
So you can see the difference in terms, one of the things, real world. I mean, their father was 17 when the debut occurred. Can you imagine being in high school at age 17 and having that for a trip, telling your high school friends where you're going for the morning? What a day.
And having Chicago at your fingertips.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, so there they are again. Go ahead to the next one, Rob. Okay, back to John and Cynthia.
Okay.
That's my mom on the left, Mary Jane Tucker Kamrowski, and my dad, John Tucker, and me, Cynthia Tucker.
There you go.
This was taken at the same picnic shortly before he died, at the house in the backyard.
There's a Tucker number 31 is in that garage.
Bet you wish it still was. Okay. Tell us, John has a great seat here. He'll tell you why.
Okay, so from left to right again at the top, John and my mom, Preston, and his wife, Shirley Meyer, Mary Lee, and her husband, Rob. Oh, wait, no, I'm still at the top. And then Shirley's husband, can't remember the name. Thank you. Cynthia? Shirley's husband.
I think Deacon is Mary Lee's husband.
Oh, Hoosier. No,
Hoosier, yeah.
Hoosier, right. And then Noble. And then at the bottom is, I can't remember her name now.
No, I mean.
Let's go to John Tucker Jr. Where's John Tucker Jr.?
John Tucker Jr. is sitting, Preston is toying with the camera and I'm on his lap. And
there you go. You got the star seat right there.
Yes.
And I'm on the right, sticking my tongue out. Brat that I was.
There you go.
My cousin Robin is next to us, who's Mary Lee's daughter.
So this is in 1956. It's Preston will die in December of 56, correct?
That's right.
Yep.
Okay.
Everybody came. Yep.
Okay, now we're talking about the movie set. We're getting back to the movie. People say, what about the movie? Here's the movie. And you have a prominent role here, Cynthia, where you are in the movie.
That's
go
me.
ahead, Cynthia.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, so this is the day that we all took a trip down to Long Beach to film a scene with the Spruce Goose, and Dean, I can't remember his name, the actor, but it's supposed to be Howard Hughes. It's supposed to be Howard Hughes, and then So this is all the basic cast and all the basic people behind the scenes. And then George Lucas is on the right of Francis there. And then that's the costume person. But it's all these people. And it was really like a family. A lot of these people worked together with Francis before. So they really were like family, definitely.
Dean Stockwell, I think, was Howard Hughes.
Dean Stockwell, yeah.
And the car that's going to come out of there is 1037, simulated as the Tin Goose. That car belonged to Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah.
Go to the next one, if you will, Rob. All right, Cynthia, this is a star picture here.
This is they built the company Tool and Die. Was it Tool and Die, Johnny?
Ypsilanti Tool and Die, or Machine and Tool.
They built a replica of it right behind the house that they used for the main scene for all the family stuff in Sonoma. And then, so this was kind of the beginning of the movie. A part of this was beginning of the movie. Yeah, you know, they kept going back to it and back and forth.
All right, John, tell them when this is in the 30s.
So this is 1933, and Preston was the darling of Indianapolis. He was really good friends with the owner of the track, but as you walked into the track, they would have you sit on this if you were a prominent person, and they'd take a picture of you on a Harley, so they could use it for advertising. So,
and he had one of the 3 gold passes. Is that what they called them?
There was only, well, I'm not sure if it was 3. I think it was 3. That there was only 3 gold passes that you could get into the Speedway 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And Preston had one of those passes.
And so it becomes relevant because of the fact, obviously, when we have the Miller Ford cars, which Preston Tucker was the key person in arranging with the Ford Motor Company, and the fact that in the advertising it talks about 15 years, and the SEC comes back and challenges the 15 years, and this motorcycle being there, and the subsequent picture, which I apologize, I don't think we have that here, with the picture of the Fords, Henry Ford, Edzo Ford, Henry Ford II, which would be, I think it was a subsequent year, was it not, John?
Oh, it was that same year. This
same year. Was it by the fence? By the fence.
Then, later on, that was actually the day he started to pitch his idea. In a couple of years later, he worked with Edsel.
That's a couple of years before the race, where the cars worked.
Then, when they had the cars ready for the 35 race. And
so that becomes important and symbolic by the fact that the cars then go back in September to be tested for the 7 Tucker cars being tested. So it's symbolic about that as well.
Yeah, okay. He had a great relationship with Indianapolis. Cynthia, you want to talk about this one?
So it's up in Charlevoix, where my grandmother had a cottage that we went to quite a bit during the summer. And so that's in the background. And then on the left is my uncle Preston Tucker, my dad, John, and then me below him. And then Preston Jr. is in front. This was a day when he used to always say, let's go for a ride. You know, let's go for a ride. You know, everybody get in the car and just go for a ride and ride around.
And in case Joe Kahn's involved with it, that's not a Tucker convertible. Anyway, so there I think we have the Tin Goose with Preston in that. Rob, why don't you go ahead and let the slides run a little bit, and let me ask some questions. There you see Francis Ford Coppola. Cynthia, tell us what your role was with the movie again. I said what your title was. What did that mean? What were you doing?
Well, it was several things, actually. Officially, it was production assistant, but I came in right off the bat, and and I talked to all the actors, the principal actors. They wanted to know things about the people they were representing, you know, mannerisms, you know, other story, you know, whatever stories. And so that was it was terribly intimidating, but it was very cool. And all during the film, I would talk to my dad or my grandmother about questions that they had about the character, because they were trying to stay true to the character. And there was quite a bit of that back and forth. So, and then and then once production started, I was getting in touch with all the people who had the cars, trying to get the insurance, get, you know, all that type of stuff, and get them to the site, wherever it was. And then somebody else took over. Once the cars were there, somebody else took over and all that, you know. But
so there's Jeff Bridges. How did the family feel about Jeff Bridges playing?
Are you kidding?
Did it capture Preston well, do you believe?
He was so wonderful. He did a great job. And he was really excited about it too. He was so excited about it. It was really neat. It was kind of neat. I have to tell the story. This isn't the place that it was at, but the first day that everybody came to the a little town called Martinez in California, and the Tucker was actually there, and nobody had seen a Tucker before on the crew. And so they were all there in this tiny little town on the courthouse steps. And it was just like, wow, and Francis said, this is the star of this show. So, and it was really a neat moment because they were just blown away.
So we saw this picture of your father shown in the movie. Of course, he's a very young boy in that. But your father was on set. John Jr., you were on set at one point?
No, I never was on set. Cynthia.
Okay. I'm sorry, you told me that. Yes, your dad was.
Yeah.
On the set.
My dad would come up periodically. Yeah.
How did he feel? How did he feel being on the set with that?
Well, you know, what's not to like? You know, it was just like a circus. You know, and it was about his family, and of course the actors all really wanted to talk to him, and you know, it was really a festive. It was really fun. It was just fun, the whole thing. He was very pleased with everybody.
So what we're seeing there is the plant in Richmond, is it not?
Yes, that's from the upstairs. This is a 1 million
square foot
factory, and so they could do a lot of sets all over the place. And then, so I'm looking down on the scene from the office part, which is up above where they had all the offices. And
so, talk to us a minute about the cars in the movie that we see through here. We can see Bev Ferrara's yellow sticks out, does it not?
Yes, it does.
Everyone can see that. That's there.
You can see the movie cars right in the back on the very left-hand side up on top, because you can tell that they're kind of cutouts. But
so they were the 4 movie cars. To answer the question in the chat, yes, they were fiberglass on a Ford LTD chassis. So we'll talk about that at the end for those who want to stay on for an extra segment.
Those were there too, but these were actually cut out of cardboard.
The ones on the back there are cardboard
painted.
Ones.
Yeah.
Fill that in. So
this is the day that all the Tucker owners were there.
And there's 1037 that was used as the Tin Goose for the movie. That's Francis Ford Coppola, one of his 2 vehicles.
That's at Hamilton Air Force Base, where we did some filming, where we get on the plane. And so this was the car that went to Long Beach. I took this picture. The sun was beautiful, and it was right there on the tarmac, and it was wonderful. This is at the courthouse scene. Obviously that's not a Tucker, but this is this guy on the left was the director of photography, Vittorio Storaro. Looks like, yeah, and so that's Jeff and Martin.
And looks like Lloyd is getting in the car.
Oh, it does. You're right. Yeah.
Is this possibly the scene with the senator? Because they're in Washington, supposedly.
Oh,
I think that's the senator's limousine picking him up. And that's just after they were walking down the steps in the movie. And Preston has to turn to Abe to get an interpretation of what just got said to him.
This is taken in Oakland, California.
There you go.
That's the reveal of the Tucker car and some of the people that were involved, and all not the actors, but some of the actors were in there, and then just extras everywhere else.
So the reveal of the Tucker car, for those of you wondering what's true or not true in the movie, is perhaps one of the most accurate parts of the movie. It was a delay to get the car onto the stage, as was shown. It took time to get everything settled. Preston had to come out and entertain the audience several times to keep them. By what I've talked to some people that were there at the time, who are now many years deceased, there was a little bit of people were getting tired of waiting. They've been waiting since mid-morning. Many of them arrived an hour and a half early. This was a major deal. The debut of the Tucker was a major deal. And so the day took a little bit longer. But there you can see, in terms of the actual pictures of what they had of the Tuckerettes and what happened. This was a big event.
It sure was.
Did it feel like it, Cynthia, when they were filming?
Absolutely. It was so exciting. It was just so exciting. And then behind the scenes, they couldn't get the car on the stage.
So this is the original.
No.
Oh yeah, this is the movie. I'm sorry, I take that back.
Oh, good. There it is. Yeah, that's my Aunt Mary Lee.
Oh, that's the original.
Yeah, that's a great one. They got all over everybody.
Shirley was not there for it.
Shirley was not there for it.
Yeah.
She was married and she'd moved away.
Yeah. And then now we're back to the movie again.
Right. Yeah. Great shot.
And so the car was not able to back up at that time. Is that not correct? I think Mark Leewood is on board with us. Mark, that's correct as well.
Yes. Yeah. At this point in time, when they were preparing the car for the debut, they still had the 589 engine in it with the hydrostatic drives. And so at that point, they only had one directional control for the flow of hydraulic fluid to move those wheels. And as a result, it could only go in that direction. They hadn't sorted out the way to back it up with the hydrostatic drives yet.
And that became.
They had a bunch of people that were just pushing that, like 10 people pushing this car onto the stage up this ramp.
The same thing that happened in real life. The same thing. It's the same thing.
Right. Now, one of the things in that scene also that was kind of interesting was, their struggle to get the car ready and up on stage. And indeed, the suspension had failed backstage. And what had happened was it took 4 batteries or 24 volts in order to turn that 589 over. And as a result, that additional weight caused one of the control arms to break. So on the fly, they were trying to replace suspension components so the car would move again. And they ultimately did, but it was quite a scramble.
But later when Pat Swigert was showing the car in Pennsylvania, that same thing broke again. So they
really
all those years later, and Rob Ida had to make a new set of suspension for the back of that because
well, if anyone could do it, Rob Ida could. For sure. Now we're, I think, at the courthouse. To the left is actually in Chicago when they were presenting the paperwork to the SEC. To the right is the movie, and that is also true to the Tucker cars at the movie. There were more Tucker cars that came in Chicago in June of '48 on the left, but now we're back in San Francisco. Are we not, Cynthia?
Yes.
We're right at the.
They're both the one on the right, San Francisco, and
right, and the one on the left is Chicago, in front of the courthouse in Chicago.
Right.
There you go.
So that's just a scene where all the press are coming to take pictures of all the happening, and all the Tucker owners were there dressed up in period costumes, and some of them drove cars. It was really neat. It was really great for them. So this is after that scene was shot, and you can see some of the extras in the background. And it's all the real kids and with Jeff and Joan, and then with the actors next to them.
And you know the fact that Bev Ferrara's yellow is not a color, but notice how often it's used because it's photographed so well, does it not?
That's true. You call it his blonde bombshell.
That car's back to its original black now.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
It's pretty in black, but I do love Bev's yellow.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Keep going, Rob. Did you pick up?
This is at the racetrack the day they filmed the scene of the car turning over. It was up
That's 1005 there, and we have 2 of the cars that were made for the movie. They are involved in this scene. One of them is the Stucker, as it's sometimes called, is a converted 51 Studebaker, and that's the one that rolls. And then there's one of the 4 cars are used to show it, of the Tucker cars that were created.
So this is a great picture of some of the people who were involved. That's Kirby. The guy in the way back is Kirby, the lawyer for Tucker, and then Alex Tremulous on the right, and then Fred, I can't remember his name.
Frederick Forrest,
and then who's Mako? This is Mako. Yeah. And then Martin. This was in Oakland.
So let's go through the real people there. Abe Karsten is the second one from the left.
Yes.
And plays an important promoter role there. As you see, there's Alex Tremulous to the far right. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of idea who these people are. I'm going to come back to them just so you see what they are in the movie. And again, look what a phenomenal picture that is. Looks like you're at a Hertz rental car parking lot full of Tuckers. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
That's Daddy, my daddy, our daddy.
Our daddy.
And he's holding up one of these that I have in my hand here, which is a pewter tucker given to people associated with the set and to your family. That's correct?
Yep,
Yeah.
we still have that.
Yep. And there's Abe, and I'll come back to that one in a few minutes. But here we have, this is in Sonoma County where they were filming for the Preston Tucker's house they were utilizing. And here's Preston showing, and is this your dad to the right here pictured in the movie?
No, that's Noble.
Noble.
That's Noble in the movie there.
And Mary Lee.
Okay. And so what we have, the movie can't get in, as Cynthia was saying yesterday when we were talking, the movie is not a documentary. It comes pretty close to being a quasi-documentary and things it picks up, but it's not a documentary. But that's the George Lawson vehicle. That's the one that Rob Ida was working to create, and now that project has ended at Rob's shop. But anyway, that's the George Lawson, and the movie's iteration of it. In '88, one of the reasons I think why they don't use the actual vehicle was the issues of intellectual property. And those were owned by Patrick Dunn. And so they did a slight variation, but that's to create the Lawson car. Go ahead. There you have in the movie, and they were introduced by Cynthia in terms of the characters that are there. But Alex Tremulous is there to the left. To the right is Jimmy Sakayama. John, you might be able to give people some background. And he was an important person to your grandfather.
He was his chief engineer and draftsman, a genius. He lived across from the Tucker house in a little trailer on a little big piece in the back. The place is still there. I'd love to put a trailer there, but he was given during the war. He was put in Preston Tucker's care because normally he would go to an internment camp, but he was so important to Preston. And we only have really one picture of him at a drafting board that I found in a photo reel, but he was actually quite an important person in Japan. When he died, his family came back and brought him back there. He was in Preston's care the whole time, and he was part of the extended family. I mean, my dad remembered him really well. There was, all those people that were around it was all a compound. So I'd love to recreate that compound, but I don't think we ever will be able to.
And he was an engineer. He had 2 college degrees in the United States, but because he was Japanese, he feared being put in an internment camp in California. Right. So there you see Alex Tremulous. Steve Tremulous is on here. Steve, talk about this picture.
Yeah, hi. Alex was my uncle, my dad's oldest brother. And this is obviously a press release type of photo where I think this was in May of 1948, where they were talking about some of the designers in the Tucker Topics periodical that came out, I think, bi-monthly. But there he is with one of the wood models, and then his little convertible sports car also that was intended for Tucker. That obviously never made it out of there. But
I feel like I need to give a Joe Kahn alert that you said convertible, but go ahead.
Yes. So that little model stuck with Alex when he left Tucker. He went to Kaiser in 1950, and then he went to Ford after that, and that model stayed with him through Ford as well.
So in the movie, he's shown as being a novice. He's not. He was at Auburn Court Duesenberg and had an important role there. Steve?
Yeah, he was one of the designers when he was really young. He had a lot of talent in drawing, and that's what he lived in Chicago. That's what the Chicago sales manager at Duesenberg saw in him. Alex would play hooky. He'd go to the Auburn Cord Duesenberg showroom and just draw these magnificent Auburn cords and Duesenbergs. So the sales manager hired him to put the customer's comments or kind of their concepts into drawing form so that they could make the custom bodies, whether it was through LeBaron, Fleetwood, a number of other coach builders. And he got $2.50 for each of those drawings. So the one thing they took for the movie that actually was something that happened at Auburn Court Duesenberg is when Alex is explaining to Preston Tucker in the movie that the third headlight, that center headlight, he designed to turn instead of the fenders turning. The fenders were extremely difficult to manufacture. and they really needed a car. So Alex switched from the steerable fenders from the George Lawson design, the torpedo design, to making the center headlight turn. And in that scene, he explains to Preston Tucker, and he thought he was going to get fired for doing it, but he had to make the center headlight turn. It does exactly what Preston Tucker wanted to do, being able to see around corners, but it was much more manufacturable. And Preston Tucker says, "Kid, if you ever do that again, I swear to God, I'm going to give you a raise." And that actually came from when the Cord 810, the magnificent Cord that Goran Burig had designed, Alex Tremulous's contributions to that was putting the supercharged pipes after Gordon Burig left Cord. Alex Tremulous put the supercharged pipes on the car,
which makes it beautiful.
Yeah, and that showed up without E.L. Cord's knowledge at one of the auto shows, either in New York or Toronto. And E.L. Cord took the young Tremulous aside and said, "You know, whose name is on this car?" And Alex said, "Well, that's yours, Mr. Cord." And he said, "Don't you ever do that again." But he gave him a $25 raise right there on the spot. So that part in the Tucker movie came directly from one of the Auburn Cord Duesenberg stories.
So in the movie, again, it's not a documentary, so they don't mention George Lawson there. They also don't mention that there was a period of time, short as it was, that Alex wasn't with the company.
Yeah, they don't mention a lot of the designers. In fact, Bud Steinhilber, the entire Lippincott team is just completely nixed out of the, out of the storyline.
Yeah.
When so Alex was kind of a conglomeration of each of the designers. He wasn't really, he was kind of a side part of the story. When the paperwork that I have in his archives goes back, he signed with Coppola in 1974. And it took another 14 years for Coppola to actually make the movie, because at the time they were doing Godfather I think it was either part 2 or part 3, and then Apocalypse Now came up, and that was another delay. So the 14 years that took place between the concept of the Tucker movie and actually filming the Tucker movie, there was a lot of skepticism in the Tucker Club that it was ever going to happen. So I think the storyline changed, over and over and over, and the designers themselves just became a single designer, and that was the Alex Tremulous character.
I'm going to do the Lippincott group in just a moment, and Tucker Viemeister is here on it. I see him, but he's going to be shown in just a moment, just like we've shown Cynthia. He's going to be shown in just a moment. Go to the next slide, please. So this is, again, what was used in the movie, and it was because I told you why they didn't use the actual drawing. But now go to the next one, if you will. Okay, Tucker.
Sorry, you take me a little bit out. This was actually your next one.
Yeah, go back, because Tucker is here with us. There he is. Unmute yourself. Talk. That's your dad. That's you.
That's my dad. Can you hear me? That's my dad on the left and me on the right. I think this Tucker was in the Boston area, maybe.
It was, and it was 1991.
So my dad was the head of the Lippincott team, who went up to Chicago and worked on the designing the car for a really short period of time. And my dad loved designing cars, and so when I was born around that same time, and he named me after the car, but he said I was actually named after Tucker Matawick, who was another designer in the Lippincott team. I think he felt embarrassed that the Tucker car had failed, and he didn't want to saddle his son with the name of a failed car.
The country and western song, "A Boy Named Sue"?
Yeah, something like that. But he didn't do that. Wasn't his thinking. So his whole life until the movie came out, that was his story. No, it wasn't the car, it was Tucker Matawick. And finally the movie came out. All of a sudden he was like more proud of the fact that he worked on the car, and the movie was a big thing in changing his perspective. And the other thing that's weird is, so this is like a normal design thing where you design you have one project at the time didn't seem like that big of a deal, But then later on, it turns out it is a big deal. And so, you know, one of the main things he's known for working on is the Tucker car, which is like kind of strange because it wasn't a big deal in his life.
John, Tucker, thank you so much for joining in on that. Let me go back to Cynthia and John, because Tucker just mentioned something, and Steve Tremlis mentioned it also about, you know, there were feelings along the way. It was tough. When I tried to get Preston Tucker into the Automotive Hall of Fame initially, he only got in on the 5th year of my trying to get him in. And there was a lot of pushback. This movie must have been a catharsis. It must have been, your dad must have felt that. Your whole family must have felt that. I mean, we hear that from Tucker just talking about, we hear about Steve. I think that's something that's not recognized, that there was really was a black cloud that shouldn't have been there.
Cynthia, could you talk about that?
Yeah,
yeah, that's absolutely true. My dad said that he and everybody felt when they came to the set for the scene where you saw with all the actors and everything, they were so overjoyed because they felt that they had been vindicated, because it was a very painful experience for them after he died and everything that happened. It was, you know, he was, you know, indicted for fraud and whatever. That was horrible. That was just a horrible thing for them. They were embarrassed, and so when that, and the kids all, and that's why Shirley didn't want to be involved, because she didn't trust that Francis would do right by, you know, the story.
You know, ironically, I just went over to my bookcase to pick this up, because this is my nomination of Preston Tucker to the Automotive Hall of Fame, and it's a
wow,
which I did, and it's signed here by your father. Signed this the night of the when Preston Tucker was put into the Automotive Hall of Fame as Mary Lee, but there was such pushback when I first attempted to have his name go forward, and I got recognized by the Automotive Hall of Fame in the early 90s, not in the Hall of Fame where Preston is, but in another part of the Hall of Fame. And I came back and I said, "But you got to take what I've given to you." They said, "Well, they don't," they said, "We don't know that we can accept him." And I kept pushing to get him to be accepted. But that was in the 90s, and the movies had already happened. There was still backlash saying, "Well, the movie is just a whitewash thing. It's not true. It's not." But what it is, and I just mentioned this, Toyota has 1004, as many of you know, the oldest NASCAR car still operational as well. So go figure. We got NASCAR for Tucker, and it's there. The reason that Toyota bought 1004, because they came into California with the Toyo Pit in the early 60s, and it was a disaster. And they had a pride point that they said when they came back, they wanted to make sure the car was right. And what they did, they bought 1004 and they put it in the headquarters of Tucker Company in Japan, and you had to walk by it. And the reason was because Preston Tucker had the vision of what a car should be, what the consumer would want it to be, with the things that should be there the consumers would want. And that was what Toyota said was the main thing. They used Deming for quality, and they used Preston Tucker. And the car was there in the Toyota headquarters for a number of years. It's now in their museum. But that's the thing that's just so ironic, that in the time of the movie, it still wasn't understood, and the government never understood it, and that was a critical flaw of the government in prosecuting Preston Tucker.
Larry,
there's
one thing that you Larry, there's one thing that you did that, and another thing you did that was so important to the Tucker family was that you got the Tucker number 39 into the Smithsonian.
Yeah, I can't take as much credit. I was working on that.
Right. Well, we were all working on it back then, but you've always been the best voice.
I was documenting the original signage in the Washington I created for the museum when it was taken over. So I mentioned this just because of the fact that I'm struck again by what Tucker said, what Steve said, what Cynthia was talking about yesterday. I think it really matters, and I think that Peter Hayes, I see sometimes on the Tucker Facebook. I think this is an uncle for Peter. Now here's another one. There, the other people that were involved. Hal Bergstrom was involved. Judy Bergstrom Felber may be on. I think that's her father. This is Bud Steinhilber, who died in January 2020, and Julie Steinhilber and Tony Mazzella, I see them on, and I think they're related. There, I see right there. There's right there, Tony.
It was on early. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Tony, unmute yourself.
Here we go.
Hi there. I'm
So-
Julie. I'm Bud's daughter, and he died almost a year ago.
Okay, great.
But
He died,
his
but
legacy lives on.
make sure we understand the great. Great goes that you're here, not great that he died. But he's the last of them to live when he died in January a year ago in 2020, by my recollection and figuring. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So,
25th.
so again, I have to do a Joe Kahn convertible alert, but there is, this was drawn by your father right there, sketch. And it was sold by Bonhams a few years ago. But there's a series of these in a sketch, and this was what he was doing there. And there's a Tucker, that maybe is 1949 Tucker, but that was a Tucker to the future as your dad saw it.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So again, you know,
Can I add two things?
please.
First of all, I think that that drawing was done by my dad, who was Bud's partner, and so. But
So Tucker,
also,
that's what I thought too, and it may be. But when Bonhams did their auction, they went back and they found paperwork. I'll send it to you where they
great.
found that there was input from others, and the concept they might have come from your father, but the actual sketching of it came.
Well, the Bud and Reed were the best buddies, so I can imagine. You know, they were like John and Paul, the Beatles, the way they worked together.
When it all really got sketched out, that's who sketched it. Now, again, bottom may not be. You know, John Tucker and I were talking about this yesterday, how truth is, and I can't say that's true. I went what Bonham said with that, and I'm a historian. So I go out and try to find what I can find. And that's what Bonham's had. They have some documentation, some paperwork back at the time that they used, their auction that they did of those. And, you know, truth is only what it can be, and it may not be the truth, but again, it does reference. So with your dad, so your dad's not left out, but they give the credit. That's how they gave the credit. So that's part of the part. For me, it's one of the things that make the whole Tucker thing so interesting. Is and John Tucker and his boys are doing some phenomenal things with what truth is, and I love knowing that some things that I think are true aren't true any longer, and we have better evidence of what is truth. And so, again, I can't say for sure that that's what Bonham says. So it may be that if we go further, we'll come right back to where you are, Tucker, about saying that it's actually a collaborative. But at the moment, Bonham's did it and gave the recognition that way.
Hey, Larry, can I add one thing real quick?
Please.
There is a thing that we've not talked about, and that is the Tin Goose. The Tin Goose was, of course, in the real unveiling was Tin Goose. 37 was the Tin Goose in the movie.
Yes.
I just saw that Pat Swigert's on this call, and I just want to send a shout out to her that she's been a great custodian of that car, but it wasn't in the movie, and maybe it should have been, but probably hard to get there. But I love the work Pat does and her museum, and everybody.
Absolutely.
Everybody should know she's the grand lady of the sport.
And with 1013 there as well. I mean, she has two great Tucker cars there. And so thank you for doing that. Phil Egan also is involved. This is the book you may have. Go to the next slide, if you will. Here is Phil's car that he made top right, and then the left you can see. This is a one of a kind, but here's some sketches of it in being in different colors of it. Kind of like those in color. Steve Tremolis, do you know where that car is today?
Yeah, you know, there's been a lot of research done on that car by Jeff Hacker, who traces down all these obscure customs from the 1950s and actually finds their designers and tells the story of now hundreds of cars. So he found this car when Phil Egan was designing it. I think they made maybe actually even 9 or 10 of these cars.
Really?
And several of them have shown up and are under various stages of restoration. Yeah, so there's a few of these. They're called the Debonair, and they do still exist. They're still out there.
Very cool. Thank you. Go to the next one real quickly. So here's the plant out in California. And Cynthia, you were there. You talked about the cars were there in one of the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, this is before the sign was put up, after the sign was put up. I think it's now a Ford. I don't know what, Johnny, do you know what this is?
I thought I remembered that it was originally a Ford Model T plant.
Yeah, okay.
It was designed by Albert Kahn.
Albert Kahn, who designed a lot of factories in the United States in the 30s and 40s, designed this.
Go to the next slide, if you will, while they're talking. So here's a slide that of the actual plant. Sean Tucker posted this. I had never seen it. Again, it's great. And Levi colorized it, and you might have seen an exchange with Steve Tremulous and I as to when it was. If it's colorized, if it's accurate, I was suggesting that it was 43, 44 degrees that day in Chicago, that it could yet, even though May 10th seems kind of late for when it could be. But it looks to me like it was the kickoff, the accessory program kickoff. But take a look at the Tucker plant there. I'll go back one and look at what the movie site was. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. That's right on San Francisco Bay. You can see it in the background.
Okay.
I think Phil Egan might actually be in that picture too on the far right. See the guy kind of looking.
Uh-huh. With the mustache.
Second from the right. He's in the back.
I see him.
Oh.
I see him. Yeah. Cool. Okay, go to the next one, please. So this is a purchase order, and look to see what that is. That's the Y1 transmission, design and fit to the 335. Look how many additional copies, or they want 125 complete transmissions more that they ordered. And part of the criticism that occurred with the federal government was they didn't think that the Ypsilanti Tula machine was for real. Preston Tucker did what is called a skunk works team. Today we call it. It was done when the Mustang was changed back in the 90s, when they almost were not going to do a Mustang, discontinue it and go to something else. And then they had what's called a skunk works. And that means they take a group and they isolate them and let them fully work on a project. And so that's become well known in the United States. So Preston Tucker was ahead of the game in doing skunk work. And he used the Ypsilanti Tula machine. It's a genuine company. It is in the movie you see with the barn there. But John Tucker, there was a building besides the barn behind the home. There was also the building which still existed after the company came to an end. It went back. And so that was there, this is actual, but that's what it looks like. So there was documentation for everything that was done. In the movie, it makes it look like it was simply that stuff was done with no keeping track of records of what happened or anything. It's absolutely not true. It's not.
Larry, let me jump in for 1 second and expand on that for you, if I may.
Please.
The amount of documentation. Well, first of all, there were 250 full-time engineers, more than Packard. So there were so many draftsmen and engineers involved in this. There are drawings, first generation, second generation, third generation, just an incredible array of documentation for each and every part, not just the unique parts that were designed specifically for Tucker, but when they utilized another part from another manufacturer, even tires, door handles, wherever a part came from, there was a specific spec'd-in drawing that itemized all the particulars, where it was sourced from, the materials that were used. Everything was documented extensively for not only for being able to go forward in what parts and pieces they were utilizing, but for being able to evaluate and repeat what was working. So the level of organization and documentation was remarkable. And all of this is extraordinarily well preserved within the archives at the AACA Museum. This is
the great footnote to that, Mark, is that it almost maybe not, because I have a letter from the owner of all those documents at the time, Pat Dunn, wanting me to buy them. And I'm a college professor. I don't have any money to buy them. But the heirs of Patrick Dunn took all of those blueprints to the dump, and they were rejected. And after they couldn't find a place to give them away or throw them away or put them on the side of the road and drive off quickly, that's how it turned out ultimately that Dave Kamek got
yes.
ability to have access to those. And now, you know, in my I'm 2 boxes off from seeing Sean Tucker. And so I just saw with Sean and Mike. I mean, they're using that all the time with things with Rob Ida, with things with you, with what you're doing. It's amazing what is happening with those blueprints. They're living today. Those are actually being used. They're, again, living. And no other car in an era has anything like that I've been able to find. And so, as you say, it's amazing, just amazing that it's all there. And you come back to the fact Preston Tucker would feel so proud to know that this could be part of the legacy. It could be there. It's amazing. It's just amazing.
It is very remarkable. Sean and Mike and myself access the archives, continuously in order to produce these parts that are no longer available. And as a result of that, we're able to keep these cars alive.
So what you see here is that we have the picture with Howard Hughes. And you heard Cynthia talk that they were down filming the Howard Hughes. And Howard Hughes it was speculated in the media. I have gone back and looked to see what was in their bibliography of everything in articles from day one. And there's 2 or 3 times there's speculation that Howard Hughes is going to be investing. And Howard Hughes denied every time that he ever seriously considered investing in. But his situation with the government and the government's looking at him was very, very similar to what Preston Tucker was feeling. And so they were very close there. So it perhaps is not a scene that happened. You were there, Cynthia. How did it feel when it was being filmed?
It was like a big sculpture, and the Italian team of lighting men were having a ball with it. It's gargantuan, this thing, So they were lighting it, and everybody just was kind of watching all the different patterns and colors that they were playing with, and then they finally settled on this. And it was very dramatic. It was very short. It didn't take that long. We flew right back up to San Francisco after this was all over. It was spooky. It was kind of spooky because it was completely black except for the lighting that the Italian guys were putting on the plane. It was neat though.
There's one story that I always heard growing up, and as you can determine, a lot of the Tucker stories are well embellished. But but my mother said that the reason that Howard Hughes and Preston never did get together was because Howard Hughes called from the Ambassador. Okay, so Howard was at the Ambassador, Preston was at the Drake, and Howard supposedly called Preston and said, "Can you come over here? I'd like to have a meeting with you." Well, Preston was busy, of course, and he said, "You know what? If Howard wants to talk to me, he can come over here to the Drake. I'm not got time to ride over there." So that may have been. So they did actually talk by phone, but I don't. That's what my family always said. But they said a lot of things. So
that's a great story. So this is underneath the plant, and the other one of the production plant. Can you show that real quickly, Rob? There you go. So there is the actual Tucker plant. Now, there's been comments made about the fact it doesn't look like stuff's around it, that things are actually being produced. And it is a stage picture. So you can accept that it's a stage picture. But now there's the movie, and you can see that the plant. So what this does is it combines both things, the garage underneath and then the Tucker plant. So it gives you a little bit of an idea what it looks like. Now we're back in the Richmond plant, and there you are. And again, you can see a little bit better what Cynthia was talking about, the cardboard ones. Cynthia, tell us where those are again. They're on bar.
In the far right in the back. I think there's like 3 or 4 of them.
So
it's pretty obvious when you saw it, but this doesn't look that bad.
Yeah. Okay. Go on to the next one, please. Now we're here at the trial. Now, Preston Tucker did not address the jury, but what he did purportedly say there, he did actually say to the grand jury, very close to it. And he also said the same in Washington, D.C. in December of '48 when he was there. He said essentially the same thing. What Preston Tucker was involved in and he recognized was free enterprise and also being an entrepreneur. Again, that's very novel for the time. We don't think anything about Stephen Jobs today. And Stephen Jobs is someone that I follow quite closely, what he did with Apple Computer. But Preston Tucker is very, very similar in a sense. Stephen Jobs looked to see what would we want if we had our phone? What would we want that to be? And that's what he created, that thinking and being an entrepreneur. And that's exactly what it is that Preston Tucker was doing. And that was a theme that Preston Tucker used. And so Bill Kirby is making that presentation. Bill Kirby is. But he's taking it off the theme of Preston Tucker. The defense was very smart. The defense rested when the prosecution ended. They did not present any evidence after that. They did not present any witnesses. There was thought that Preston Tucker would testify. I understand that he wanted to testify. Why wouldn't he want to testify? But Bill Kirby made the decision with the other lawyers there, let's not do that. We don't think the government has done what it needs to do. Because the question was, did the Preston Tucker and the defendants that were under trial for criminal fraud, including mail fraud, did they intend to build the car or not? And one of the persons that testified owned car number 25. And he had driven it from Minnesota to be there to testify. He had lost a lot of money. Bill Kirby, when he had the chance to do on cross, said, how did you get here? Well, I drove a Tucker car. He had one of the few Tucker cars that were sold out that were in private hands. How was your ride, basically? It was the best ride you could ever have from Minnesota. Right there, I think what Bill Kirby did pivoted the whole case when it was established that a dealer who had a car, who owned a car, drove the car to the trial. That's just my opinion. It's not in the movie, and you can only put so much in the movie. But I think that pivots what happened in the real case.
It also helped to have a lot of Tuckers outside the window to look at. The jury went to the window and looked out the window at quite a few Tuckers that were sitting outside. And that was kind of the clincher.
The cars existed. Now, this is back to the movie. After the movie, Cynthia, we've seen this one again, but this is where they're coming out simulating after the trial.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. They had all the Tuckers lined up. There was about 25 cars there. I don't know about in reality, but on set, there was about 25.
At 21 for the movie, plus the 4 movie cars. So.
Oh, yeah, right. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. I've already shown you, that's the bottom of this, but there was it. And that's the Tucker story of the movie. We said we were going to do, as we set up for an hour, and we're just a little bit over an hour. We have way more we could be doing. Let me tell you what we have planned. A number of you have asked about the Tucker cars that were in the movie, but I would like to go back to Cynthia and John again and get their impression. And when did you first see the Tucker movie, Cynthia? When did you first get to actually see the first cut of the movie?
In San Francisco at Fort Mason down by the water. And they
I know that area.
And they showed that, and they showed Willow at the same time because Lucas was working on that. And then we went to a premiere in Marin County someplace, and then we went to an LA premiere too.
I don't want to put you on the spot. You can say, Larry, stop it. I got to believe you had a Kleenex in your hand the first time you saw it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was unbelievable. Although by that point, it was kind of like, it was so much work, and it was a long period of time. And there was a lot of, there was a lot of emotions also, but there was also a movie to be made. You know what I mean? And so, so that was really neat. It was neat for the family. It was just great. I also wanted to say that, I didn't talk about this the other day, but there's a book Jeff Bridges produced, which he does for every movie, scenes from the movie set. It's really, and it was really neat. He does this for every single movie he shoots for the cast, and he also has done a couple books. And there's information in there too.
And he loved playing the role of Preston Tucker.
Oh yeah.
What's that?
He loved playing the role of Preston Tucker.
Oh yeah, he was born for that. He was totally born for it. He just loved every second of it. And he followed. We gave him, the shoes that he wore, the suits that he wore. He even had one of the main ones. You can see this in the movie. Jeff asked, what could he do to personalize him? He said, well, and I asked my dad, and he said, well, when somebody would ask him for a cigarette, he would always reach into his pocket and take it out, because at the time cigarettes were very expensive and very, you know, and so he would just give it to them. And so Jeff did that like 10 times during the movie. So it was kind of neat, you know, and there were things about, you know, like the house, what the house looked like and what the relationship was like between everybody, you know, and it was wonderful.
John Tucker, when did you see the movie first, and what was your response?
First time I saw the movie was in a screening room in Troy, Michigan. They invited anyone from the family. It was about 40 seats, I think, there. And my kids all went, and we went. Mary Lee went, and it was quite an event. Frank and Sharon Tucker were there, and it was just really we were trying to do a premiere in Ann Arbor, but he wouldn't. We actually talked to the head of Paramount Studios one day. He just called me out of the blue, and said, "Well, you know, we can't do that because we have too many copyright things going on, and we can't. But we will do a screening for the family." And so that was really nice of them to do it. And 5 minutes into the movie, of course, you see the scene where there's the mountains of Ypsilanti in the back. And I remember my sons will remember very well Mary Lee going, "There's no mountains in Ypsilanti."
That's what happens in California during a filming.
Yeah. But it was, for me, it was the culmination of a whole lifetime of work for me, because I never let go of this story, and I tried to tell people, but a lot of times people just didn't want to hear it. So,
your dad, how did your dad feel? Cynthia, John, talk about how your dad felt when he saw it.
He was just in his element. He was there as much as he could be. He was so proud. He knew a lot of stuff, so that helped a lot for the actors. And but that had a lot of that he did a lot of pre-work, before they got the script written and everything. And then when it first started, they had all the actors in this big room, and they went through the whole script, and so they were able to talk to Dad about things that they had questions about. So that was just great, and he loved that. He just loved that.
Cool. Steve Tremulous, do you happen to know what Alex Tremulous thought when first time he saw the movie, or where he saw it?
Yeah, he was kind of getting into Alzheimer's at that point, but I know he was awfully proud of it. When they were doing interviews and articles about the movie coming out, they had interviewed him, and he had said, or at least in the interviews, a lot of times either, fake news or the reporter gets things wrong. He gets credited for designing the Cord 810 and 812, which he, did not have any design input into those automobiles. Those were Gordon Buerig's designs. All Alex did was put the supercharged pipes on those cars. But that showed up in a number of interviews. I think People magazine was like the most forefront interview. And Gordon Buerig looked at that and was just incensed that thinking that Alex was taking credit for the Cord 810 when in fact it was the interviewer. So there's a number of letters that Alex wrote to the publications and newspapers, kind of explaining that, no, I didn't do the Cord 810. You need to correct it, but things don't get corrected in the newspapers. They just kind of move on to the next story. It's just kind of the short attention span. So that did cause some consternation for both Alex and Gordon Buerig together.
Mary Kirby, am I correct? Are you on here?
I am. Yes.
Hi, Mary Kirby.
Mary Kirby, great to have you involved. Tell people who your dad is.
Dad was Preston Tucker's defense attorney, along with my uncle Spike, Frank McAdams. And Dad essentially was the main, although not the only attorney that did the cross-examination of the 78 witnesses that were put up by, I think the prosecutor at the time was called, or his name was Otto Kerner.
And so you heard me give credit to your father for what I believe was a good point.
The one thing, though, I would like to correct who wrote the summation speech that my father gave at the trial. You're correct that, of course, he didn't put on any defense because they felt that In the cross-examination, both by my dad and by one of the other attorneys, Mr. Thompson, they in essence had destroyed all of what the state was trying to prove. That was that the car was fraud, that you can never make a car like that. And in point of fact, by cross-examination, and the great example you gave, Larry, of a fellow who came down from Minneapolis driving his Tucker and how much he loved the car. And he said in cross-examination, he loved the car, so did his wife, so did his grandmother, so did his mother-in-law. I mean, Dad got him going and going and going. But the actual summation that was made was all Dad's. It was not anybody else except Dad's. I spoke to Dad many times about how he created that, and the entire summation was 4 hours long with no notes.
It's amazing. In Chicago, he gave me a copy of his points that he was going to make. And
one last thing I should add, because I find it so fascinating. Preston was unable to pay Dad. They did send one check to Kirby McAdams, and unfortunately the check bounced because there was no money. And so in essence, for about 2 years, my father worked almost exclusively on the Tucker case. And at the very end, Preston and Vera were up with my mother and my father in Waukegan, where we grew up. And by the way, Dad and Tucker would come every weekend during the trial. They would drive the Tucker. Dad did not drive it, but Preston did. They'd go up to Waukegan, where Preston would spend the weekend with us. And by the time they got up to our little house in Waukegan, there was a whole train of people following them because they wanted to talk to Tucker, to see the car, et cetera, et cetera. Very exciting. I remember that part of it very, very much so. But anyway, the last part was, so Preston and Vera, Dad said, wanted to give my mother and my father their own Tucker. Preston had felt really bad that Dad had done all that work for a couple of years and Dad never got paid. And Dad, as Dad would say, the worst decision of his life, said, "Oh, Preston, thank you so much, but I'm not a mechanic. How would I get the parts?" So anyway, we did not get the Tucker.
Mary, if you found the Tucker, I think between Mark Lieberman and and Brian and Sean and Mike Tucker, there's plenty of people today that know how to have kept it going. So
I know, as Dad said, it was the worst decision of his life. The best was marrying my mother.
There you go.
Thank you.
And they think the best was having you and your sister. So let me thank you so much for coming in. Let me move quickly into the cars to take us to the end. So this was on the left is what Joe Kahn posted on Facebook on September 30th, 2018. I updated it to the right. Go to the next slide, if you will, Rob, and we'll just go through very quickly with the cars here. There we have Frank Tucker, and he is there in California, and they're the cars. And we owe Frank Tucker a lot that he wanted to have those cars preserved. And so there they are. And they were painted different colors. Richard Jones has notes I have from him that one of the movie cars is painted 3 different colors to be used in the movie. And they used a paint that was easily able to be changed for color. So there you see it. Go to the next one, please. So that is, of course, is the Tucker car that's there at the AACA Museum for you to see it there. It was a gift of Sharon Tucker that was made Frank's widow in 2009. It was restored by the Gilmore Garage Works of the Gilmore Car Museum, and it was completed in 2012. You saw in what Joe Kahn posted that was in the Natmas Museum in Auburn. Here we have the, sometimes I still call the Bolo car. This is what, after the Tucker has been rolled, they show a Tucker car that's there afterwards. This is it. They obviously didn't want to use a real Tucker car. And so this is was purchased on September 25th, 2018 for $95,000 in an auction. And you can see it today at Dieselland Park, Orlando in Florida. The next one, please. This one is someone who also has been around Tucker cars a lot, and we would recognize him as Martin Donaldson, one of our own Tucker members who's also on the Tucker Advisory Board. So I needed to have a chance to give a shout out to Martin. He is here with the car that was a gift to the Ypsilanti Automotive Heritage Museum by Frank and Sharon Tucker in 1997 at the Tucker auction. Not the Tucker meet. I had the privilege of being very, very close to Frank Tucker, and he and I talked about his giving the vehicle or not giving the vehicle. And he said, I know if I give the vehicle to the Ypsilanti Museum, I know it always will be there, and it'll be a way for me. He was not one of the siblings of Preston Tucker, but he said it'll be a way for me to do something to assure that the city of Ypsilanti will never forget Preston Tucker.
I was involved in that gift, and that was exactly how it was supposed to be. It was never to leave the museum. I actually left the museum because they sold that car to Eric Breslow for $40,000. And then Eric Breslow put it on eBay and sold it for $100,000. So I have a very bad point in my heart for that car because it should be an Ypsilanti. And Stephen Tebow is a great guy, and he bought it under his circumstances, but that's not that. I'm glad you brought that up, Larry, because that's actually the story. He did not ever want that car to leave. And,
no, he did not. And my
dad talked him into donating it to us and said, we all talked about it at Hobbs Restaurant that if that car goes there, it'll stay there. Ypsilanti will have its Tucker. So
it'll be a lifetime. It'll be there, and it'll anchor the museum, and it'll anchor the heritage. And Ypsilanti is amazing to have the Kaiser plant there, having the Corvair manufacturer there, a number of things that happened there when the GM plant, the heritage that's there in Ypsilanti, and the house that unfortunately still goes without being part of a historical district and being something done with it.
Well, we all, that's why I was involved. My boss actually started the Ypsilanti Auto Museum because of Preston Tucker.
A huge missed opportunity for the city of Ypsilanti, but
the money was taken out, and well, we won't go into it, but it's too bad. And I would love someday for the AACA to let us take one of those cars somewhere in Ypsilanti. It won't be that museum, but somewhere that it can be shown off. But
yes, thank you.
It's kind of a shame.
Yes. So here's another one of the replicas. This is in Norway, and it was bought on eBay. So keep your eye on eBay. You never know what you'll find, but you probably won't find that. The next one, there we go, where you see the Stuckers. It's sometimes called Student Tucker, whatever it may be. That is in the Tallahassee Museum, the Tallahassee Automotive Museum. Tucker 1005 is also there, so you can get to see a real Tucker while you're there as well.
I took that picture when I was there visiting Laveau Moore, who owns that museum. Wonderful guy, and he's got
it's fabulous museum. There's just amazing stuff there.
It's incredible, and I don't know how old, where he is now, but he was a wonderful guy. I just walked in there out of the blue, and he spent the whole day with me, and we went all through the museum. And it's huge. I mean, it's a couple million.
It's just cars. It's not just cars. Next one, please. Okay, John, this is your picture.
Those are the pieces that Frank Tucker gave me early on in the game. And, I had my cafe at the time and didn't have any money, but what I really wanted to do was take the front end of that and have it coming right out of the wall of my cafe, but I never did. And then in 2017, we decided to move. So I had no room for anything anymore. So we put it on. It wasn't, it didn't bring a ton of money, but the guy that bought it down in Alabama has built 2 different Tucker projects out of those pieces he has. And he actually, another shout out to Mr. Khan, but he is building a Tucker convertible, which he will not misrepresent. But
there you go. Okay, now here's another picture, and this is out in Arizona. So these are 2 that Frank took with him when he moved to Arizona. And those were owned by a museum that ultimately sold it. So the Western Heritage Museum put those up for sale. And you can see there's potential for two cars, not the rear end and the one on the left. But again, these are parts that were there. And go to the next one, please. Now, this is me being at Claremont, so you get to see me being here. But on the background, the reason I put it up, you can see the setting of it, where you see the Tucker movie. And so I get asked, is that a Tucker movie car because of how it's set in the setting? Go to the next one, please. You don't have to have me there still. Now you see it without it being, you can't see up above where it has the movie kind of things around it. That is not a Tucker movie car. It may be that what I showed you in the slide from Arizona, that those pieces were put together to be used. The Volvo Museum constructed that car, and it was done. Mr. Claremont has passed away. He was up in years. In the past year, he passed away. I was there last summer looking at the car. They also have a Tucker engine off to the left that you can't see with this shot of the picture. But that is, it has an interior. The Tucker movie cars, the Ford, did not have an interior. They just simply had a driver's seat. That has an interior, and it has a Tucker radio in it, and it does not have a motor in it. But they did a pretty good job. If you're 20 feet looking at it, you think you're looking at a Tucker.
I see Mark's number 6 is in the background there.
There you see it right there in the back. Yes, it is. So there you go. All right, so those are the slides that we have. There were many more, unfortunately, that we didn't get to that Cynthia had that would have been great to be talking about. This has been done in part to support what the Tucker Automobile Club of America, as we came into partnership with the AACA Museum, and for all practical purposes went out of legal existence. It's still so important to us with what the AACA Museum does to help us with the Dave Kamick. Dave Kamick, to me, was a dear friend. And to see that his legacy continues, that motivates me to want to be involved, to try to do what he was trying to do. And I love Cynthia. Thank you so much for coming out today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
You know, I've never had the pleasure of listening to you talk about this. I wish we had a little more time. I'm sorry that I cut you off at different times. So we're moving along, trying to go through it.
Right.
But this has been great. Thank you so much. John Tucker Jr., again, you provided so much to help as well today. Appreciate that. To Rob Kane, thank you for what you did today with it.
Oh, the AACA Museum is always happy to help anything related to Tucker. So before you wrap it up, there are some questions. I don't know if you can see.
Go ahead. What questions do you have?
There was more than one question about were all the movie cars made out of fiberglass, and I always wanted to know if they were pieces. The movie car that we have at the museum tends to be, it seems like it's one big piece minus a door, a trunk lid, and the hood. So
you're that's what it is.
Fiberglass construction.
Right. They usually, if there was a door, they cut a door out of it, it's like a big mold, and they cut it out for the driver's side door. John, John Tucker, you've seen them up close more than I have.
Well, I had to get that, the number 3 ready for an unveiling at an event we were doing at IPSI. And we actually, we worked night and day getting that thing sanded and painted, walls blue, of course, and getting it ready. But it was a complete car. It had a roof and everything. So 4 of them were those, at least. Then the others were different things they needed for production. And Cynthia showed on one of her films, or one of her slides, the cars and all the doors and trunks and lids stacked up.
Yes.
In the factory. And that's all those doors and all those pieces are what became the rest of they made bunches of those. Made a bunch of fenders, a bunch of trunks. A guy called me, he said, I'm almost done with my Tucker car, but I need a trunk. So he ended up buying that whole car that I sold. And he's still working on it. But so people really, there's always someone that says, well, why don't you make a new fiberglass one? And well, it's more than you think it is. So
jump to answer a question that I see that's come in here, because I think it's a good question. It just came in a moment ago. Mm-hmm. Peter, you've asked, did the big 3 kill the Tucker and why? I get asked that a lot. And as a Tucker historian, I'm the business school dean for 28 years, and I'm a lawyer. So I have approached it trying to look at that in an objective way. Senator Homer Ferguson was the senator of Detroit. He was the proxy for the big three. He also headed up the war assets, oversaw that committee. He had a legitimate concern. So he had a role of oversight, but there's no question of what his intent was. You know, get Preston Tucker out of the plant. They wanted cars produced. There's a big plant. A car maker could use it, and Preston Tucker's there. And Preston Tucker was a threat for his ideas. But I think what made it so difficult was a combination of time. The movie compresses time. Preston Tucker started working seriously on the vehicle in 44. Abe was working with him in 1945. George Lawson was working with him in 1945. The debut comes in June of 2017. Tucker 1001, which is there at the AACA Museum, is manufactured in March of 48. The last car is the very last ones to get to 50 in the late fall of 48, and the company is all but done. Alex Tremulous is no longer working with the company come December of 48. The company is over in 48. Tucker is indicted late spring, early summer. He faces the trial in October of 49. So that's compressed. It had to for the movie. The money that was involved, the technology that was involved at the time for some of the things Preston wanted, disc brakes could not work. There were things like that he was still trying to get on the car. And he had the vision. He wanted those kind of things. They could not yet be done. Henry Kaiser said of his recollection that he didn't realize when he put his first 50 million in, that was like throwing a small stone across a pond, barely a ripple. It's a very, very capital intensive business. There were some 40 car companies that were attempted. The Fascination is one of those. Matter of fact, one of our Tucker board members, I think they may have one or two there in their garage. There were a number of cars attempted. Preston Tucker tried. He didn't get loans. Kaiser did. There were a lot of issues there. I don't believe the big three alone was why it was killed off, but I do think that big three had no desire to see him succeed. But I think it ultimately was money, and I think the SEC created some of those issues for him, why raising money became difficult. And the level of over-intervention by the SEC as a new agency is clearly a factor in what happened.
Larry, Rob here. There's a person named Kirby who's adding some things to the chat window.
That's Mary, yeah.
Yes, she was. There was a secret report that was done, and that's what was leaked to Detroit News. That was what was Collier's had. That the judge never gave that to the defense. Unbelievable. So what it is the SEC findings of their investigations, and why that was not permitted to be given, I don't know. Preston Tucker appropriately was upset. Bill Kirby thought it was a total injustice by that. And there was, as Mary said, FBI was investigating Tucker, communicating to the Department of Justice. And that's because J. Edgar Hoover was a friend of the senator from Detroit. And so back in that day, things could happen that way, and it should have been released. Did that cause the car company not to make it? No, but did that cause a total, if you're looking at the scales of justice and how you expect today, how they show it, it makes it like this instead of being like this when you look at how you should approach something. The defamation was asking about defamation. So Preston Tucker brought lawsuits afterwards for defamation. That's how car 1016 ends up being in the Henry Ford Museum, because the Detroit newspaper bought car 1016 to look at it very closely. And what they were trying to do is take early advertisements of the Tucker company that says there will be such things as fuel injection, disc brakes, things like that, and try to prove that those things didn't happen, and therefore that what they said about Preston Tucker was not defamatory. And of course, we know that before all that was resolved, Preston Tucker died in 1956. The museum ultimately received, the Henry Ford Museum ultimately received that car from the Detroit newspaper. But that was one. There were other lawsuits also brought. he's a public figure. Preston Tucker was. There's a different standard for a public figure for defamation and slander than there is for someone who's not. As a university president, I have a different standard that I'm under, because people can say all sorts of different things of the faculty and otherwise that they couldn't say to me as an individual. But as a university president, I have a level of public figure status, not a high one, but if it has something to do with that. That's why Preston Tucker was not going to win any of those defamation cases. So he passed away. That said, I have found subsequently, though, that there was one case that he looked like maybe they were going to settle. So a settlement would be good as well, as long as the settlement had the acknowledgement. John Tucker, I don't know if you've seen anything, or Sean, I know, and Mike Tucker on cases otherwise yet.
Yeah, I think, I mean, he did die before anything happened, right? But I think some of the interesting things that happened in those defamation suits were some of the depositions.
Yes.
And one of them is with Terry McDonald, the head of the SEC, where he flat out admits to leaking the report to Drew Pearson in the Detroit News, which is a federal crime. Yeah. So that kind of information that came out of those depositions is really interesting.
It is. It is. It's very interesting, because there's no question that it was wrong how they handled it. Totally wrong.
No, somebody asked real quick, kind of off topic, if the pewter models or anything like that could be available.
Yeah, they're available on eBay when you see one, but you don't.
I think they only made like 100 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would imagine too, if somebody is also interested in the movie and the history, if those press kits that you got, a lot of these photos were even available anymore, or where you obtained them. I mean, you obtained them originally from people that had to do with, like, Cynthia or any production of the movie, but
many of us, I got mine from eBay, but I got them early enough from eBay that I was able to get them at a different price than what they are today. They come up from time to time.
Pretty much the stuff that Cynthia and I had, we've passed on to the boys, so they have several of those that they keep in their collection, and once in a while they'll let one go, but not very often.
Yeah.
We all end up advertising for eBay, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
And we want to thank Larry for all of his organization on this subject. Cynthia, John Jr., don't forget, I think we have some other Tuckers, not just Sean and Mark, but there's some other relatives that joined in today. We had more Tuckers on this call than we've ever seen.
Great. Yeah, I'd love them all to chime in. That'd be great. Because
I got to ask, Tucker V-Meister's box is next to mine at the moment. Tucker, did you expect to see yourself today on this? There you go. You got to see yourself back in 1991 being there. I bet you weren't expecting that.
No, I wasn't expecting it at all, but it was great. I think this thing was really worthwhile. And thank you so much for putting it together. Really, really interesting.
Great. Thank you.
This was a long-awaited subject, and I'm glad everybody enjoyed it. And if you enjoy more Tucker Talks, which we no doubt will have, please go to AACAmuseum.org and click Join Donate, and give us some support, please. And we'll make sure that Tuckers are always in everyone's future.
Thank you. I would like to put a little plug in for Sean and Mike. They have a YouTube page called Preston Tucker's Garage, I believe. And they're always doing videos, and it's growing immensely. And Mark Lieberman's working with them on it, and it's I've actually been the cameraman for a couple, but it's a nice thing that they're doing. And
Cynthia, again, thank you so much. Thank you, Cynthia.
Oh, my pleasure, Larry. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
To all of you, this is Melissa Tucker. Thank you. It was great.
My younger sister.
Long now.